Hello, my name is Andrea, and I am taking over for Carly for today's Haunted Hollywood Hour.
But I'm still here.
But I'm getting there. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm taking over. It's my show because there's nothing that I love more than devil worship. Today we are talking about Satan, ritual sacrifice, child abuse, power tripping authority figures, and a little bit about what is a moral panic. It's the McMartin satanic ritual abuse case. Y'all don't know, ground zero for the satanic panic was right here in our own backyard in the coastal town of Manhattan Beach, which is right south of LA.
And can I interrupt and say something about Manhattan Beach?
Of course. I have a lot to say about Manhattan Beach.
I just think that there is something going on in Manhattan Beach for all of the 20th century because
It's been a hotbed of activity,
of extremely people being terrible. Mm-hmm. And like in the 1940s, that was when William Haynes and his partner were accused of soliciting a young child for sex. He was literally just like telling the kid, hey, stop chasing my dog. Here's 5 cents. Get out of here, kid. Then William Haynes and his partner got beat up by this KKK adjacent group. There's so many parallels to this kind of stuff happening in Manhattan Beach.
Yes. So if you're not familiar with Manhattan Beach, that's totally fine. But for those of you who like a mental map, think about LA and then go a little bit south to LAX and then go a little bit more south and over to the sea. And there you are. That's where Manhattan Beach is. So I do want to also shout out here at the top of the episode that this episode that I put together is heavily inspired by the podcast series, The Devil You Know by Sarah Marshall, which goes in depth on the satanic panic through the 80s and 90s. So she does mention this case, but she goes into, the whole thing. So if you have any interest in that topic, please listen to that podcast. It's very good. And shout out, Sarah Marshall, inspiration. But yes, let's get into it. Oh, go ahead, Belle.
Sarah Marshall also did an episode on the satanic panic on her podcast.
You're Wrong About?
Yeah. So.
Yes. Yeah. And she's been working on a book about satanic panic for I don't even know how many years. And I feel like the book has turned into a podcast now, which is also great because I love that medium. But as y'all can hear, joining me today, we do have Carly, our Haunted Hollywood Hour CEO, and also a practicing Satanist. And as I'm sure those of you who listen to this show will recall, forced me to use a Ouija board.
Am I a Satanist? I am pro all the gods. And I do love how, God says believe in me, but Satan says believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my vibe.
I like that. Also joining us today, we have Belle, who is known to be a witch that can fly and can ride a bicycle in wedges, which is the same thing.
That's right. And I'll sing about it too. And I'll sing whilst I ride my bike with wedges on.
Yeah, and actually, I forgot when I wrote that, you also covered yourself in green paint to be a witch. Yeah. Not at Halloween. It was over the summer.
No, it was in the summer for my best friend's five-year-old's birthday.
So Carly, Belle, anything spooky you want to share? Any spooky stories?
I'll share something spooky that had happened to my sister. She went to Georgia to stay at White Oak Pastures, which is the farm where folks like Joe Rogan say they get their meat from because it's supposed to be like this regenerative farm where you can stay at and you can walk around and you can see how everything is done. She said it was the most bizarre experience because she went into, this is rural Georgia. She shows up and the whole town is White Oak Pastures. And she's like the only person there. Everyone treats her really weirdly. Like there's like these 4 blonde women in this general store. They're all like talking amongst each other. And then she walks in and they're like, who are you? Like she felt like an outsider. It felt like she was being followed everywhere she went. There was no other people staying at the farm. Part of me, I asked her, do you think they treated you like this because they Googled your name when you made the reservation because she's known as being a veterinarian who investigates the food system and the horrible things that are done in the food system? Or do you think that they treated you like that because you were an unattended woman and in the South, they have no concept of a woman traveling alone without her husband or boyfriend, and they just don't know how to process that. I sent her a bunch of questions, and I was also like, he could have murdered you and fed you to the pigs. I just think that would be a fascinating horror movie called Unattended Woman. A journalist goes to investigate this farm where all the celebrities say they get their meat from because it's so great. She shows up and she's the only one there. And it's like on TikTok and on Instagram and everything. It's like, come visit, look at this, look at all the things that are happening at this farm. And she also said it was really weird because there weren't very many animals there. And so if this is the place where like all these celebrities are getting their meat from, why aren't there many animals there? And so it also makes you think, I don't know if it's true or not, whatever. Like, is that really where the animals are being raised? So a lot of questions, great premise for a horror movie. I'm very excited to get answers back. Maybe she's not responding because she's dead and fed to the pigs. We will find out next week on Haunted Hollywood Hour.
Well, I'd love for her to respond. That's a little nerve-wracking. Can you text me later when you hear from her? Because now I'm worried.
Yes, I'll let you know when I hear from her.
Okay, thank you.
The South in general is a frightening place. I know I went to school there. So please, folks, avoid the rural South if you can. Drive through it. Don't stop.
So, Belle, you have a lot of experience with the South. How do people treat single women who are just going through, traveling through, getting a hotel by themselves?
Yeah, no, it's true. They look at you like, where is the person that's supposed to be attached to you, and why are you unsupervised? And if on top of that you look like me, there's a lot of what are you? What is going on here? So yes, as I said, it's a frightening place. There are certain places where I would not stop on my way back and forth from school to home. Like Mississippi, I'd be like, even if I run out of just make sure you get petrol before you get to Mississippi, and then don't stop until you're past Mississippi. The rural South is a frightening place.
Yeah, I don't like anything I'm hearing, but that is spooky. So I hope your sister's fine. About anything from you? Spooky?
Well, so recently, for the last week or so, things keep falling on in my house. We'll go into the kitchen and all of a sudden something that was up on top of a shelf or something will be knocked over. Or in the middle of the night, we'll just hear something in the closet fall. So there's a couple of options here. A, I'm haunted. It's finally happened. B, we've got some kind of animal visitor. Or C, we're just very messy and we tend to throw things up without much security and they keep falling in the middle of the night. So one of these things is happening. But either way, being all quiet in the middle of the night and all of a sudden hearing something clash somewhere else in the house, it's not been the best of sleepy time activities. So that's been fun.
Well, it's probably a poltergeist, I would assume, is the most obvious answer.
I think so.
Well, I don't have anything spooky, but I did see Begonia last night, which is about aliens. So
how was that?
It's okay. It's okay.
I highly recommend Pluribus on Apple TV. The best show I've seen in a while. I absolutely love it. I love the premise. I love the setup. I love it's got all the things, all the emotions. You're scared, you're intrigued, you're laughing, you're frustrated. It captures so many things so well.
All right. So if you're a fan of either this podcast or the other podcast, watch Pluribus. That's take-home message. Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing some spooky news and media recommendations. And my media recommendation is Begonia is okay. But let's talk about the McMartin case.
And I will just add, my sister is currently live on Twitter.
Okay, so she's alive.
She's alive.
Okay, all right. That's good. I'm glad. That honestly was on my mind. Okay, good. All right. So I would like to start with defining what is a moral panic. So this definition I'm getting from Professor Mary DeYoung and what she said on the Devil You Know podcast I already mentioned. She is a retired professor of sociology, formerly at Grand Valley State University, and she's known for her studies on child sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse as a moral panic. So a moral panic, as a definition, is a collective process that occurs in response to social change or social disruption that can cause anxiety or fear of the unknown. What happens is it distracts us from any structural issues that are, at the root of why there's been a change or why there's been a disruption, but instead focus on specific bad actors or one malevolent group that can just be eradicated, and then things can go back to the good old days. back to normal. So it's very focused on this idea that what we had before was good. Something changed, now it's bad, and I want to go back to the good. And it's one person's fault.
So it's like, okay, child pedophilia and child predators have been a thing for a long time. For some reason in the 80s, it got blamed on Satanists.
Well, and I have an answer for that question.
Okay.
It's because the 60s and 70s were actually the first time that society as a whole even acknowledged that child abuse really happened. Up until that point, it was like, that doesn't happen. That's not real. Obviously not in the 50s. They're not talking about that, right? The 60s and 70s, people started to acknowledge that it was really real. What they could not deal with, the thing taking them away from the good old days, was that it happened at home. Society could not deal with that concept. It was too painful to realize that like trauma affects people. Generational trauma is real,
And also, it's probably like really hard for people to understand your father is a pedophile.
Right. Yeah. If you think you weren't touched by your uncle, no, you probably were. Like all of that is really, really hard to sit with. So when the door opened, and again, I don't want to say too much about Sarah's podcast, listen to it, but there's a couple of things that happened all at the same time in the early 80s that put the focus on satanic panic. The McMartin case being really the biggest one. If it weren't for this case, it would have gone a different direction. I think something else would have been the thing. But either way, in the 80s, they were very primed to have a moral panic around what's happening to our children, because they couldn't look at, well, what's happening is that we as parents are not really doing enough. So instead, it's something totally like, we didn't do anything wrong. We put our trust in these daycare workers and these preschool teachers, and they're the ones because they're Satanists, right? Like that's easier to comprehend. And I also think it's very interesting and very timely because we are currently in a very similar moral panic. We have gone full circle back to the beginning around child sex trafficking.
Child sex trafficking is a legitimate problem.
Of course it is.
It's not your 5-year-old in the suburbs. It's 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Correct. It's not children. Yeah, 100%. Exactly. The moral panic that we're currently experiencing on child sex trafficking is very focused on white children. Thank you, Belle, for bringing that up. That's incredibly true.
Yeah.
It's also focused on this idea that it's happening by a secret cabal, by putting children in cabinets that Wayfair is selling, right? Like it's spearheaded by this movement, this moral panic that we're in is spearheaded by QAnon, right? A known conspiracy group. And then folks like Tim Ballard, who just wants to capitalize on it and make money. So, but again, if this idea that something that's very real, child sex trafficking, that happens mostly to children in other countries or who are brought here and now experiencing that, and it's terrifying and horrible. Instead, we're focused on, Hillary Clinton drinks child blood, and that's what the problem is. And if we kill her, then there's no more problem. Like that, it's literally the same thing. It's the same moral panic, just like a slightly different font. So we've learned nothing in 40 years is the take-home message.
Yes. And moral panics, anyway, they just constantly, it's a cycle. It's been going on since wanting together to live too close to each other. It's always one thing or another. So there's just it's never.
Yeah. And I also think the reason we're seeing this moral panic we're currently experiencing and others are happening right now is that they are a response to the more progressive, I'm doing progressive in quotes because how progressive have we really gotten, but more progressive years that we had, during the Obama years where, gay marriage becomes legalized and, it was just sort of a general, again, progressive in quotes, but generally a more progressive time. And now the response to that, of course, swing the other way. Trump gets elected, and now we have all these moral panics.
God, and I'm just thinking of like the trans kids, like the whole moral panic over, these kids are being forced to transition and they're being forever altered. When it's like, actually, like top and bottom surgery for kids is not a thing.
It doesn't exist. It literally doesn't exist.
And oh my God. Yeah. And it's like,
and that's also a very similar to the satanic panic. It's again, the same panic in a different font because now it's focused on children's genitals, just like satanic panic was, right? So we keep doing the same things over and over. And I think we got out of the satanic panic eventually. I think someday we'll get out of these current moral panics that we're in, but it'll happen again, right? It'll come up somewhere else. Yep. So with that positive note, let's talk about the 80s. But how does a preschool in this idyllic town of Manhattan Beach, idyllic if you're white and rich, but whatever, idyllic town of Manhattan Beach lead to a moral panic that swept the nation? Let's find out. So again, for those who have not been to Manhattan Beach or are aware of it, it is very wealthy. Currently, the median income, and this is again median, so that's including like the homes that don't live right on the water. Median income is $200,000, but the median home value is $2.3 million. If you watch the reality show Selling Sunset, they do feature Manhattan Beach pretty frequently in some of the fancy homes there. It is, a beautiful coastal town known for overpriced retail and having many Karen-like residents. Myself, as a native of West LA, I had several friends from there. My first job ever when I was 15 was at an art gallery in Manhattan Beach. And then I went back and worked at a restaurant there in college. So I am really, really familiar with that city, unfortunately. But you know what? I will say the Kettles still exist and they have great muffins. If you're ever in the area, go to the Kettle, get a honey brand muffin. You'll thank yourself. But let's go back to Manhattan Beach of 1983. So we are in the middle of Reagan's first term, or I guess towards the end of it, but it's in full swing. As we mentioned, the country was shifting from the radical 60s and 70s. And now we're on like this wealth-focused prosperity gospel meshes of the 80s. And again, as we had just mentioned, parents were just starting to accept that sometimes child abuse happens. Like that, I get it, okay. And the population was around 31,000, which is similar to how it is now. But the folks were a little more blue collar. It wasn't quite as wealthy as it is today, but it was still a place that, obviously not just anyone could live there. It was overwhelmingly white then and now, thanks to a lot of deliberate redlining there. I think we should do another episode someday on Bruce's Beach, a really fascinating story there. But if you don't know what that is, look it up.
And also, Manhattan Beach was where Jack Parsons lived.
That's right.
Briefly. So, yes, Satan.
Yes, Satan. That's it.
Was in Manhattan Beach, but not in the way that the folks in this story are thinking of.
Yeah. So it was, a beautiful, wealthy town with semi-normal people living there. But on a fateful day in August 1983, a woman named Judy Johnson went to the police in Manhattan Beach and told them that doctors believed that her 2-year-old son had been sodomized. And when she asked him, he said, Mr. Ray did it. Mr. Ray referring to Ray Bucky, who was a 25-year-old man and staff at the preschool this little boy went to, run by a woman named Virginia McMartin. I want to add, I couldn't find a lot about Ray Bucky, I think probably because at this point, like, poor guy, leave him alone. But something fun about him is that he loved UFOs and he believed in pyramid energy.
Yes.
And he slept with a pyramid over his bed.
And he also had a pyramid hat.
He did have a pyramid hat that he would drive around with.
Which is a little wire shaped like a pyramid. And when he was driving, he would wear his pyramid hat because he believed in pyramid energy.
Yeah.
And you can pick some weird, quirky thing about every single person.
Yeah. And they're pedophile.
And say, Carly owns sheep and she's into crystals. She's a Satanist, and she talks a lot about eating children as a joke.
I mean, so
she's joking.
So you say. Yes. So this 2-year-old named Mr. Ray as responsible for the sodomy that his mom said he experienced. But of course, her story gets more detailed in all the wrong ways. She starts saying the abuse happened on an altar. There was a decapitated baby there. There was a figure called the Goat Man. The police still did not find this to be a reason to dismiss her. That's odd because the police dismiss everything, but not this. So go
yeah.
I guess because I'm Manhattan Beach, they didn't have a whole lot else to do. She's a white woman. Yeah. Everyone in this story is white. I wanna say as well. So there were not one of the only things not at play here, surprisingly, for Manhattan Beach. But yeah, everyone in the story is white. But the police didn't actually interview her son or have a child psychologist or anybody interview her son. They did see if her son could pick Ray out of a photo lineup. He could not. And they didn't feel that he showed any signs of sexual abuse, but they still proceeded anyway. They did a raid of Ray Bucky's home. They found his pyramid stuff, of course. They also found a rubber duck, very nefarious, and Playboy magazines. And I guess that was enough. He was arrested. He was arrested September 7th. So, about a month between Judy telling her story and his arrest.
And I have a feeling every single man that has much more incriminating stuff in his apartment and or house.
I really thought you were going to say every man you know is a rubber duck. I was about to be like, yeah.
I myself have rubber ducks and written pornography because I'm old and like all kinds of naked people on the walls and things like that. So if
the police come to your house, you're in trouble. Yeah. But that's not even the craziest thing that happened in this initial part of the story. The most insane thing is that the Manhattan Beach police thought, I know what to do. We're going to send 200 letters to families of students who go to this McMartin preschool and say, hey, there's a potential of child molestation at your kid's school. 1, please question your child. Doesn't matter that as parents, what do you know about questioning children? You don't know shit. Whatever. 1, please question your child. But also 2, don't tell anyone. We don't want to incite panic. Oh my God. It does my head in. They also in the letter even say that Ray Bucky is already a suspect. So they are beyond preconceived to go into this without they're all worked up. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I love the children that are in my life. I cannot imagine what I would do or what I would advise my parent friends to do if they got a letter like that. I would freak out. Of course you would.
And parents are prone to freaking out.
It is.
Let's face it.
Because when look what I was saying, the problem is when you have a child, there's nothing, somewhere in your heart that there's absolutely nothing you can do to truly protect them. Like there's just not, especially if you have any intelligence in you, that's not the case. So everything kind of just makes you reactive to that. And to receive a letter like that, I mean, that is kind of irresponsible. I mean, and when I heard about this too, and I was just like, I almost jumped out of something. It was so stupid. I cannot believe I cannot understand why this was a good idea. And even if, let's just say they want to do the letter, fine, do the letter, but then have it be incredibly vague. Hey, we're questioning that there may be some questionable activity at your child's school. Please the police station. Misconduct. Don't name a staff. But this letter, I found an excerpt from one of the articles I read from LA Times. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim, including oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or chest area, and sodomy, possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. What the fuck? Why would you put that out there? My God.
Also, they are writing this letter with all of these possible things that could have happened based on the testimony of one woman who isn't sounding super reliable based on this first bit of information and no correlation from her 2-year-old. And also, he's 2. What can he correlate?
And anyway. Do you get into what this woman turns out to?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Okay. It's coming.
We'll put a little foreshadowing in.
Yeah. This about the 2-year-old.
Morgan has issues. Yeah.
2.
Yeah. 2. What are you asking a 2-year-old?
I just spent a few days with a 2-year-old last week. My friend's gorgeous 2-year-old. What? You could not get anything like this out of a kid unless you're going, now, baby, did you, unless you're leading them on, no kid is going to go, I was put in an altar and touched and there was a dead baby next to, no. Have you met a 2-year-old?
Yeah. They're not forming coherent thoughts for the most part. And we will get into that and the types of interviews that they did. Actually, it's my next point. Good segue. But yeah, so parents of current and former McMartin students were encouraged to take their children to the Chunk Institute International in LA, where they interviewed hundreds of kids, again, former and current students from McMartin School, ages 4 to 10. So no 2-year-olds at least, but also 4, also even 10. Don't trust a child. It's fine. They were interviewed by a variety of people, but one of the key interviewers who talked to most of the children was a woman named Key McFarlane, which is confusing that she's a key person. Her name is Key, K-E. But anyway, Key McFarlane. So to your point, Belle, in an effort to ensure that they were getting the truth, kids were asked a lot of leading questions like, can you remember the naked pictures? Your friend said this thing happened, and they would then provide these really graphic details and then say, did this happen to you too? So it wasn't leaving any room for the kids to actually say, from their own memory, something that they experienced. It was all leading questions. Key McFarlane also used a lot of interesting interview techniques, like using anatomical dolls or puppets, or playing Pac-Man to try and help the kids communicate if they couldn't use words. But that also means that she's interpreting their whatever they're doing with the puppets or the game, and she's the sole interpreter of what it means. She also was of the opinion that if they were denying that anything happened, if they said, no, I'm fine, nothing ever happened to me, that actually affirmed that the abuse did occur because it meant they were too scared. Yeah. So, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she had very good intentions, but she went in with the mindset of this is definitely true. And I'm finding evidence of truth, not that I think it may or may not be true. So for these kids, they could feel that energy, right? So then they're trying to confirm evidence because it made her happy. It made their parents happy. It made the police happy. It meant they could go home and they could stop being questioned. So it really led to a lot of leading interviews.
Also, let's think about this. This is how kids communicate. When you're trying to come up with, talk to your kids and you're telling stories and you're coming up with things, you start with something and then they add to it, and then that's how you do
right.
it, right? Let's I don't know. Let's talk about this book we just read, and we're going to, what about if we do this? And the kid's yeah, what about if we do this? That is just how kids do it. Kids repeat what you say to them.
Kids love improv. They love a yes and.
It all kind of NDC. It's just the insanity of this. It's absolutely mind blowing. If they would told me they would do this grown as adults, I would be, you're doing it wrong. Doing this to kids is criminal irresponsible.
Yeah, to your point, yes, in proper interrogation, you wouldn't even do this to an adult, you would let them tell the story. But anyway, so these kids, again, to your point, how much they are just they are imaginative. They end up talking about all kinds of things we were abused in tunnels under the school. We were taken to other businesses and where we were assaulted. The teachers would kill small animals in front of us to scare us. We saw a baby sacrificed in a church. I was taken to a graveyard and we dug up a coffin and I saw a body full of cuts. Because this is why I called you a witch bell. They said they could see teachers flying in the air dressed as witches.
Yep. See?
Go ahead, Farley. I see your mouth open.
The flying in the air and the digging up of graves, that should have been the point at which people are okay, how could a bunch of preschool teachers take a whole class to a graveyard during the day and dig up during school hours?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same thing as the logistics, the current moral panic when they're they took 100 babies and how? You couldn't keep 100 kids hidden if you tried, right?
Yeah.
They were apparently taking them on all these field trips off to the lack of common sense here is, again, mind-blowing. Just mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, this is sort of a smaller thing, but the preschool itself was on a busy street, a major thoroughfare with a ton of windows and no curtains. So it's not like it was this very secret shut down place where all these things could happen. No, it was just a normal school. Anybody could walk by any time and see what was going on. So, they, this idea that they could get away with any of these things with nobody noticing ever everybody was wanting to fight for the children, and they thought that was the right way to do it, I guess. In addition to these interviews, these interrogations, 150 children were also physically examined by a woman named Dr. Astrid Heger, for signs of abuse. And she used something called a colposcope, which is what it sounds like. It's a microscope for your butthole, to look for scarring. Only 6 of these 150 showed any scarring, but there were 6, right? So okay, this shows something. This is evidence. However, researchers would later find that the scarring pattern is not always consistent with sexual abuse. The scarring can happen for other reasons. But despite this, these 6 children showing this quote unquote scarring led her to say that she believed that all the children were telling the truth. So we have now 2 experts, Key McFarlane and Dr. Astrid Heger, saying that, yes, we have evidence and this is definitely true.
And what was it it was 6 out of 150.
150.
This is also really sad, but chances are 6 children out of 100 are probably being abused by their parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Or family members,
Yeah, or it was scarring from something else. There's all these possibilities, but the idea that it has to be the school definitely isn't true, and more likely to be at home. We know that now. But so in February 1984, a radio station, for whatever reason, decided that they would share details of the interviews and blast that out to like the local LA area. So if parents in other places didn't know about the case, they know about it now. And even though, yeah, it's the 80s, it's pre-internet. At this point, of course, now it's national news, it's national attention, it's everywhere. And every, much like today, every news agency, whether that's TV, radio, newspaper, whatever, they want that engagement. So they're going to keep upping the salaciousness of what they can share to get more engagement and get everybody riled up and scared about this thing that's happening that could happen to their children.
And you're going to get an untainted jury that way for sure.
Absolutely, of course. So the Children's Institute International interviewed 400 students. And of those 400, they concluded that 360 of them had been abused. I don't know why the other 40 kids, I guess they were the lucky ones. I don't know. At that point, just say all 400. Like, what's the point of saying 360? But okay. So 360 out of 400 were abused, and they named 7 different employees of the McMartin Preschool. So Ray Bucky, who we know, our pyramid enthusiast, his mother, Peggy McMartin Bucky, his sister, Peggy Ann Bucky, his grandmother, and also 3 other female teachers. The Institute also concluded that the staff were for sure running a pornography ring. That was definitely happening.
Wow.
The parents and then other, adults that got involved, which is I'm sure you can imagine, many other adults were like, oh, I want to get in on this. Like, I care about satanic abuse of my child or other children. Were championing for the slogan, believe the children, which is a great premise, but it's a flawed execution. It's this, they had this idea that there is no way that children could lie. They literally believe that children never lie. Anything a child says is truth because they're incapable of lying.
And this is so mind-blowing because there literally are plenty of situations where children are telling the truth and not being believed about other things. But here in this case where it's clearly not something that's really happening and they believe the children, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
It is very frustrating.
The simplification that the opposite of truth is a lie because that's not how language had. Just because they are thinking themselves, I know what is truth, and I am saying the opposite in some sort of moral choice. They're just saying things. And
they're just saying words.
The thing that comes out of their mouth is a truth. It's absolutely just bonkers. Just absolutely insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also, again, going back to the idea of the moral panic and having an outsider party that you can blame. It's you want to believe the children when they're blaming someone that isn't you, right? Then you really want to believe them because now it takes all the onus off of you as a parent, all the responsibilities on this outside party. We punish them, we throw them in jail. Now our children are safe forever. And I did all I could as a parent, right? Because I believed my child when they said that their teacher was a witch and could fly around the room. So I did a good job. And I have empathy for these parents. I really do. But it's quite fascinating, that collective psychosis that all these parents were experiencing of, we're hearing these completely insane stories we have no reason to think are true. We never experienced anything like that when we were children. However, this must definitely be happening. And children never lie, even though I, as a child, almost certainly lied. Because every child, to your point, Belle, maybe it's not a lie in traditional sense, but like says whatever, they're just saying words. Somehow all of that left their minds and they're all in this collective psychosis of like, no, this is for sure happening. It's fascinating. It's very
much a Karen dog pile.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And again, I very much agree with that. And I do have empathy for their position, their situation. But it's frustrating to look at it from the outside many years later of like, how did no one step in and try and calm this down? So in the meantime, right, so we have the children being interviewed. We have a few of them being more than a few, but we have the children being physically examined. We have this Believe the Children movement going on. And now we have a task force that was formed by the Manhattan Beach Police to investigate. It did take 8 months for the task force to form. So then people who were already predisposed to believe that the McMartin staff were guilty, like, oh, well, you took too long to form a task force, or anything that you found doesn't matter. This task force, of course, did not find any evidence of anything. There were no tunnels. And they had, like I'm gesturing right now on camera with like a little, like I'm moving my hand, like a scanner, like a scanner. What am I trying to say? a thing that looks into the ground.
Sonar. I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yes, ground.
So yeah, they had a thing that could see into the ground. They're like looking for proof of these tunnels. There's nothing.
There were even parents came out with shovels, right, and started like digging around, looking for the tunnels. And
the most they found was like a trash pit, which had trash for trash. There are also no small animal bones. Of all the animals they're supposedly torturing, and there was no pornography found. And I don't know. It's pre-internet, right? So it would be harder both harder and easier to find the pornography if it existed, but they never found it. And so, nor like proof of like them taking pictures, weird sets where they were taking these pictures, nothing.
What it took to actually take a picture in the 80s, they weren't pulling out the phone, taking a photo. If you want to take photos, it required actual hardware. And if you want to get it developed, you have to have a lab. Because you get and they were taking them somewhere to be, or they had a whole
and then no one was noticing.
No, it was like, oh yeah, these perfectly fine photos of naked people. That's babies even.
And also taking photos indoors was a lot harder back in the 80s.
Yeah, but we got those giant flash bulbs that if anybody's old enough to remember those, that after a few, I know I'm older and I was also in Ecuador, so we were even further behind. So I remember those damn flashes. They were enormous. So this is ludicrous, just ludicrous.
Yeah, it is. But all the same, the preliminary hearing for the McMartin 7. So again, that's the 3 teachers, Ray's whole family, and Ray. So this is April 1984, and then the trial was going to begin in January 86. 14 former students testified, and they were telling the same stories that they were telling at the Children's Institute International. So salacious stories about animal abuse and grave robbing. But then when they had to name their abusers in a photo lineup, they named the current city attorney and also Chuck Norris.
Chuck Norris.
You have something exciting to do.
That man was doing something.
See, QAnon would take that and run with it.
Oh my God. Yeah, for sure. And of course, as we mentioned, media played a huge role in amplifying this story. And there were articles, coming out everywhere, all over the country. An example headline I saw was "Brutality at McMartin School Revealed." So again, just from the title, it's making it sound like it's truth. It's proven. It's happened, right? So then, of course, you want to read it.
Yeah, even just like allegations of child abuse is a pretty inflammatory headline.
Yeah.
There was also, just recently, it's one of those things that when you are thinking about something, all of a sudden you hear it everywhere. But I also listened, Oprah was involved in this because she gave all this satanic panic people not only a platform, but even once it was proven that this was insane, they were wrong, none of this was true, she actually became part of the movement that was like, no, we must look further into this. They were obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh, you said Oprah. I heard you say opera, and I was like, opera.
See, I'm Latin.
Oprah.
It's 2 things.
Yeah, no, and all the talk shows of the time were covering this. Not necessarily McMartin, because now we're talking about like once Oprah and Geraldo and Sly Jesse Ryan and all them got involved. This is post McMartin. This is now sort of general satanic panic. But yeah, and I mean, I think in Oprah's case in particular, and I apologize if I'm misremembering this, but I could swear on my life that she herself was a victim of child sexual abuse. So
yes, indeed.
So of course, and again, I have empathy for all these people. I even have empathy for people who are currently swept up into the fears of child sex trafficking, and our current moral panic, because it is scary to know that that the world is a scary place, especially if you yourself are a victim, if you're carrying that trauma and you hear about this thing happening. Of course, your instinct is going to be, I want to get to the bottom of this. Unfortunately, it again becomes this, within the moral panic, it becomes a group psychosis of we're ignoring evidence because we want to believe this thing is going to make the world make more sense. It's going to make the world a safer place once we eliminate it. And it really, really clouds your judgment. And it's sad. And the media, again, really, did not help. But
this is the first time, I just have to add, this is the first time that the media is really like, it's on TV, it's in the news, and it's in magazines. So it's really, instead of being this funded by advertisers in your magazine, it's like the motivation to get as many eyeballs as possible on the TV screens constantly, on the newsstands, buying the magazines. There's never been more incentive to get interest from readers and viewers.
Yes, and it's OG clickbait, right? Nothing gets people's eyeballs in your screen. No, nothing gets bought more than something like this. It's salacious. It has to do with children. It has to do with sex. It doesn't get any more like attractive than that.
Well, and I think we, again, have to add in the backdrop of Manhattan Beach. It's beautiful. It's on the coast. It's wealthy people. If it can happen here in this wealthy, white, gorgeous town, it can happen anywhere, right? It's in the heart of LA. Well, not the heart of LA. It's below LA, but whatever. The people who aren't from Southern California, it is LA. It's all LA. It's Hollywood, Here we are in Hollywood, basically. And it's happening here. You have to be alert because it can happen. If it's happening here, happen anywhere. So that the backdrop of the city, I think, also made a big difference in how much people were interested. But we get through the preliminary hearing, but a new district attorney comes on and he's like, this case is weak as fuck. Y'all are crazy. However, I'm going to proceed with the case against Ray and his mother, but we're going to drop charges against the other 5. So we went from the McMartin 7 to now the McMartin 2. Ray Bucky and Peggy McMartin Bucky. So let's circle back to Judy Johnson, our original reporter of this child sexual abuse, saying that her 2-year-old had been sodomized back in 1983. It started this whole thing. So it turned out 2 years later, in 1985, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was not known at the time that she went to report this supposed crime in 83 that she had schizophrenia, but we know it now. And so that really explains a lot about why her story was all over the place, why there was no real evidence. And it's unfortunate that everyone missed the signs it's the 80s, so, I don't expect anything more, but it's unfortunate that the signs were missed. And on top of that, a year later in 1986, she died from alcohol-related liver disease. So one can assume that she was self-medicating her schizophrenia with alcohol. So quite a sad existence.
I just wonder what happened to the kid, because the kid must have had a real tough early childhood life with that sort of situation going on in house.
Yeah. The only thing I could find about him, so she was going to testify against Ray and his mother, but she died before the trial began in April 1987. And then at some point, the defense wanted her son to testify, and his dad said absolutely not. So it sounds like at least in this situation, the dad was being very protective. Who knows? But I'm sure it was a hard life for that whole family, for the Johnson family, the mom, the dad, and the son, and any other kid she might have had. But yeah.
The idea of a 6-year-old being a witness, or testifying something that happened to him at 2. Like just here.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it's possible for a 6-year-old to remember something that happened when they were 2. No. Is it?
It was. It's just not going to be some sort of admissible, court evidence. Like this, if they remember colors, snatches of things. Like, come on. And if on top of that, the kid had a traumatic childhood, which we can possibly assume given the state of his mother.
Yeah.
Just the mind boggles as to what was going on in that kid's head. I'm so glad that the dad at least was reasonable and said no.
Yeah, exactly. And this was the defense trying to bring the kid on, not the prosecution. So from all sides, again, to your point, Belle, like we have to stop relying on these kids' testimonies. Like just don't.
There was just not a single reasonable adult in the room, like not one.
Yeah. But the trial did begin in April 1987. There's a lot that happened in this trial. I just tried to pick some highlights, but it was a little all over the place, as one can imagine. A key witness for the prosecution was the Children's Institute International interviewer, Kee McFarland, the one who loves the puppets. And she fought to defend her interview techniques. They did show some video during the trial of her interviewing, and it was very obvious that she was like rewarding the answers she wanted and, sort of like denying, what's the word I want? Like showing displeasure at the answer she didn't want. And she, she really believed in what she was doing. Again, I don't look at her as a villain. I think she really thought she was saving children. But even the judge thought that her credibility was very diminished through her testimony, that having her as a witness actually was a bad thing. So this went on actually for 3 years.
Crazy. A trial lasts 3 years.
3 years. And I think a lot of that was watching tons and tons of videos of the interviews. And Key McFarland testified for 5 weeks, so that is a lot. And then of course we also had the Dr. Astrid Heger. I'm sure she was on there for a long time. So yeah, there was just a lot to go over, I guess, even though there was no physical evidence at all. That's fine. But
the way that courts and the law says, if there were 150 children, I can imagine literally them going like kid 1, kid 2.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, exactly. So January 18, 1990, so a little under 3 years, both Ray and his mother were found not guilty on 52 counts, but the jury was deadlocked on 12 molestation charges against Ray and 1 count of conspiracy against Ray and his mother. So this did result in a mistrial. And I believe through, what I've seen, that there was never any physical evidence against Ray at all. But the reason for, the sort of hesitation on not finding him not guilty or finding him guilty on the 12 molestation charges was they saw this mindset of, but we have to believe the children. Something must have happened for this to have gotten started. There has to be a kernel of truth in here somewhere. And if we, if we let this guy go, we could be letting a child predator back out on the street. So I somehow the defense did not do a good enough job in laying out the timeline that shows that it started from a schizophrenic woman's rantings, no offense, Judy Johnson, but that's how it started, to judging this guy for liking aliens and pyramids, to, bad interview techniques.
Yeah.
That was not laid out clearly enough, I guess, that the jury felt, and also all the media, of course, the jury just felt they couldn't acquit. So we got a mistrial. So they ended up doing a second trial. This one was much shorter. It ended July 27th, 1990. So it was 6 months. It was just against Ray because the 1 count of conspiracy against Ray and his mother, they didn't file it again. It was really just the 12 molestation charges. Once again, deadlock jury. Once again, mistrial. So to this day, Ray Buckey was never actually found innocent, which is really unfortunate for him because, he's going to have to carry that around forever. And the only reason that he was not found innocent is not because there was ever any evidence or that there's still a question of what happened. Like there really is not, but just because people were afraid of missing something. So they'd rather be safe than sorry, pretty much.
Yeah.
The prosecutor did decline to charge Ray Buckey again, but in total, he ended up spending 5 years in prison, waiting for trial or during trial. And his mother, 2 years in prison. And then, of course, all the emotional damage that to both of them, to his whole family for even being accused. And of course, then the McMartin preschool business decimated. One can guess how that went.
I can just imagine what it was like for him. He's like, what in the world is happening? The world has gone crazy and turned upside down. I'm living a nightmare.
Yeah. And it's something too, again, that we as human beings want to say, oh, that would never happen to me. But it could happen to any of us, And just got to be in the wrong place, wrong time, and, go into Belle's house and see all their crimes and be like, oh, well, Belle's a criminal for sure. So, it can happen to any of us. To this day, as far as I can tell, this is still the longest and most expensive criminal trial in the country. The investigation and trials, all of them, cost more than 15 million taxpayer dollars.
Think of all
the things that money could have gone to.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have, but what if?
They're right. It was they had already cut everything out.
They wouldn't do it now, but what if?
How many weapons could the U.S. have bought with that kind of money?
Right.
I mean, seriously.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe it's better, I guess, that we had this trial. We learned a lot.
Well, I mean, this is during the AIDS crisis, right?
Right.
That money could have gone to AIDS treatment.
I mean, yeah, the point is the government wasn't spending any money on the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, California did slightly better than most.
Yeah, I mean, we're in California, we're in LA County, so that money could have gone other places, but whatever. Yeah, more than 15 million, which is crazy. But we learned a lot, from this case. This is actually kind of like the jumping off point for child investigators, where they really learned a lot about the best way to interview children and the power of suggestibility. It seems so obvious to us now, but really, again, you think about where were children before that? In the early 1900s, they were working. They were 5 years old and they were working. They were, in the factories.
Probably getting abused, and
yes,
sex abuse was happening in the factories for sure.
Absolutely. But they were just mini adults, so no one even talked to them. And then you get to, the 50s, and they're expected to be perfect. They're perfect angels. They're always, they always are polite and dressed well and blah, blah, blah.
Meanwhile, they're getting raped by their uncle.
Absolutely. And then the 60s and 70s, again, we're starting to listen to children for the first time ever, kind of. But only the things that we are palatable for us to really understand and hear, right? And so now we get to the 90s and we're like, okay, we have to actually look at child psychology a little bit more deeply. We can't keep making these assumptions about children like they can't lie. We can't assume that about children. Why would we ever have thought that? We lied as children. Why did anyone ever think that? And the power that an authority figure has over a child, especially one that's experiencing trauma, the want to please or the want to escape, either one is a good motivator to say whatever the fuck you want me to say so I can get onto the, make you happy or get out of this room.
Yeah. I watched an interview with a woman who's now a documentary filmmaker who was 10 when she was being interviewed about what happened at this preschool. And she said they were so persistent about getting a certain answer out of me. And I was like saying, no, this never happened. No, I didn't see any of this. And they drilled her so much that even as a 10-year-old, she left, and into her 20s, she was thinking, wait, was I abused? Her mom would just treat her like, yeah, you were probably molested. So she had weird relationship problems in her 20s when she was having her first consensual sexual experiences. It really took going to therapy and getting all that worked out. She was 10. So she was, in a place where she could say no, but she still questioned herself. Imagine a child half that age being fed that kind of suggestive information, internalizing it and thinking, yeah, this really did happen to me.
Yeah.
You know, that changed their lives.
Yeah, I have read about that woman as well that you were talking about, Harley. And there was some other adults who, later said, being interviewed as part of the investigation or, testifying at the trial, how pressured they felt and how much they were led to give answers. Led to years of sort of self-doubt and confusion. So that's really, really, really painful. And then, of course, there is the legacy that this then led to similar investigations and trials around the country. But it's very important.
Hundreds of preschools.
Hundreds, yes. But it's very important to note there has never, ever, not once ever been proven ritual satanic abuse, not of children, not even of adults. It's just never happened. Satanic ritual abuse simply does not exist. There is still, even to this day, we're at satanic panic, or at least the one from the 80s. We're, in different but similar moral panics now. But there is still, some people still believe that ritual satanic abuse is real and that it happened then and it's happening now, even though, again, we have no reason to think that. So that's great. But take home message, child abuse is real. It presents in many ways. And people are still very much contending with the idea that's more likely to happen at home than a scary teacher wearing a pyramid hat in a tunnel while he kills a rabbit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's not drag queens. It's not doctors trying to make your kid trans. It's not young adult authors trying to groom your children by exposing them to sexual content in books that you need to ban. So many things that it's not. Yeah. It's probably that guy that you think is really great who lives in your house.
Yeah. It's that neighbor that you get to call your kids to come uncle or aunt or whatever. It's a cousin.
So that is the McMartin satanic ritual abuse trial and case. I hope you found it interesting.
Good job, Andrea. You did such a good job with this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So if you want to listen to more spooky stuff, alien stuff, satanic stuff, dumb people stuff, because people are generally dumb, follow us everywhere. Haunted Hollywood Hour on all the socials. Email is hauntedhollywoodhour@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. We want you to like our show, share it, subscribe to it, tell all your friends, talk to us about maybe a ghost that you've seen, Would love that. I think, we only have so many of our own ghost stories. So tell us your ghost stories or alien stories. Were you abducted? We'd love to know. And then I'll let you do the sign off, Carly. I don't remember what it is.
Well, yeah, we don't really have a sign off, but we'll just say until next time. Bye.
Bye.